The laughter echoed through the dojo like poison. 72-year-old Thelma Gardner stood trembling with her cane while young martial artists mocked her wrinkled hands and gray hair. "Go home, Grandma," someone sneered. They saw weakness. They saw a joke. What they didn't see was the 6-time champion who once made grown men bow in fear. What they didn't know was that some legends never die, they just wait. Stay until the end to witness justice and comment your city so I know how far this story travels. The autumn rain had stopped just minutes before Thelma Gardner pushed open the glass door of the Golden Dragon Karate Academy. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor inside. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her weathered hand gripping the handle of her walking cane, her eyes adjusting to the fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. From where she stood, she could see them 20 or so students in crisp white GIs, their colored belts marking their ranks, their young faces flushed with exertion as they practiced kata in synchronized movements. The sharp ki shouts filled the air, punctuated by the slap of bare feet against the training mats. Thelma took a breath and stepped inside. The receptionist, a young woman with bright pink highlights in her hair and eyes glued to her phone, barely glanced up. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather not. "Yes, dear," Thelma said softly, her voice carrying the gentle rasp of age. "I'd like to inquire about classes." The receptionist's thumbs stopped mid-text. She looked up, really looked up this time, her eyes widening as they traveled from Thelma's sensible orthopedic shoes, up her floral print dress, past the cardigan draped over her thin shoulders, to the perfectly coiffed silver hair held in place with simple bobby pins. "Classes," the girl repeated, as if Thelma had just asked to borrow a spaceship. "Yes, karate classes." Thelma smiled, the kind of warm, patient smile that grandmothers perfect over decades. The receptionist glanced toward the training floor, then back at Thelma. "How old are you?" 72. A pause. Then, 72. "Yes, dear." "And you want to take karate?" "That's right." The receptionist's expression shifted through several emotions: confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been pity. "Look, ma'am, I don't think—" "Is there a problem?" A sharp voice cut through the air. Both women turned to see a tall, angular woman in her late 30s approaching. She wore a tailored black business suit and heels that clicked against the floor with authority. Her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to lift her eyebrows, and her lips were painted the color of dried blood. This was Erica Morrison, the dojo's general manager, and she looked at Thelma the way someone might look at a stain on expensive upholstery. "This woman wants to sign up for classes," the receptionist said, her voice dripping with skepticism. Erica's eyes narrowed. She looked Thelma up and down with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating livestock. "You're serious. Quite serious," Thelma replied, her voice still soft, still kind. "Do you have any martial arts experience?" "A little, many years ago." "How many years?" "Oh, 50 or so." Erica's laugh was short and sharp like breaking glass. 50 years ago. So, never essentially. "I remember some things." "Ma'am, with all due respect, our insurance doesn't really cover—" "I can sign a waiver." Erica tilted her head, studying Thelma with new interest. Not the interest of someone considering a student, but the interest of someone spotting an opportunity. A slow smile spread across her face. "You know what? You're absolutely right. You can sign a waiver." She turned to the receptionist. "Chelsea, get her the paperwork." Chelsea blinked. "Seriously?" "Seriously. If she wants to take classes, we'll let her take classes." Erica's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "After all, the Golden Dragon welcomes all students regardless of age." The words were right, but the tone was all wrong. Thelma heard it, recognized it for what it was. But she simply nodded, thanked them both, and carefully lowered herself into the chair to fill out the forms. As she wrote, her handwriting small and precise despite the slight tremor in her hands, she could hear Erica making a phone call in the next room, her voice low but excited. "Rick, you've got to see this." "No, I'm serious." 72. "I know, right. Trust me. The students will love it." "Morale boost." "Yeah, exactly." Thelma's pen didn't pause. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse. The first class was scheduled for the following Monday at 6 o'clock. Thelma arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did for everything. She'd changed into a simple white t-shirt and loose black pants, not a GI, because she didn't presume, and had tied her hair back in a neat bun. Her cane rested against the wall by the door as she carefully removed her shoes and placed them in one of the cubbies. The dojo was already filling with students. Most were in their 20s and 30s, fit and confident in their movements. A few teenagers clustered in one corner, laughing at something on someone's phone. Near the front, a group of more advanced students, brown and black belts, were stretching their bodies, bending with the ease of youth and regular practice. Thelma found a spot near the back and lowered herself carefully to the floor. The mat was firm beneath her, familiar, in a way that made something deep in her chest ache with memory. "Yo, check it out." The voice came from her left. She glanced over to see three young men in their mid-20s, all wearing green belts. They weren't looking at her directly, but they weren't exactly being subtle either. "Is that someone's grandma?" one of them whispered loud enough for half the room to hear. "Dude, she's got to be like 90. Think she's lost? Maybe she's looking for the senior center. That's 2 blocks down." Muffled laughter rippled through their group. Thelma kept her expression neutral, her eyes forward as she slowly began to stretch. Her joints protested, they always did these days, but she pushed through it gently, methodically. "Should we tell someone?" Another voice joined in, this one female. "Like I'm genuinely concerned. What if she has a heart attack? Or breaks a hip? God, can you imagine?" More laughter spreading now like a contagion through the room. Thelma felt their eyes on her, felt the weight of their judgment and their amusement. She'd felt it before, many times in many places. She knew how to carry it. The door to the instructor's office opened, and a man in his early 40s emerged. He wore a black G with a red stripe down the side and a 4th-degree black belt tied at his waist. His hair was cropped short, military style, and his face had the kind of sharp, aggressive angles that suggested he'd been handsome once and was now coasting on that memory. This was Sensei Rick Donovan, head instructor, and his eyes swept the room with the casual dominance of someone who'd grown very comfortable being in charge. Those eyes stopped when they found Thelma. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, confusion, and then unmistakably amusement. He glanced toward the observation window where Erica stood, watching, arms crossed, that same predatory smile on her face. Rick's mouth twitched. "All right, everyone line up." His voice boomed through the dojo. "Lowest rank in back, highest in front. Move." The students scrambled into formation, an organized chaos of bodies finding their places. Thelma remained seated, uncertain of where she belonged. She wasn't ranked. She was nothing here. "You." Rick pointed at her. "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry, Sensei. I wasn't sure. Back row, far corner." His tone left no room for discussion. Thelma nodded, using her hands to push herself up from the floor. It took her a moment longer than it should have, longer than it once would have, and she heard the whispers start again. "Oh my God. This is insane. Someone's gonna get sued." She made her way to the back corner, aware of every eye on her, aware of the barely suppressed giggles and the exchanged looks. When she finally stood in position slightly apart from the others, Rick began the class. "Warm-up jumping jacks. 50 count off." The room exploded into motion. Young bodies leaped and spread arms and legs, pumping with energy and vigor. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thelma tried. She raised her arms slowly, stepped her feet apart carefully. But where the others jumped, she stepped. Where they moved with spring and bounce, she moved with caution and care. 5, 6, 7, 8. Around her, the students were barely breaking a sweat. Behind her, she could hear stifled laughter. Dude, she's not even lifting her feet. This is sad, man. Like, actually sad. Why would she do this to herself? 9, 10. Thelma kept going, kept moving. Her breath came harder than it should have, her arms trembling with the effort of staying raised. But she didn't stop. By the time they hit 50, sweat beaded on her forehead, and her legs shook slightly. The rest of the class looked ready to go another 50. Rick watched her with an expression that might have been concern on anyone else, but on him looked more like satisfaction. Push-ups, 20 go. The class dropped. Thelma dropped 2 more carefully, lowering herself to her knees first, before positioning her hands. She attempted a push-up, a modified one on her knees, and barely managed 5 before her arms gave out. Around her, students pumped out 20, 30-some, going for 50, showing off. "Come on, Grandma, you got this!" someone called out, and the room erupted in laughter. "Maybe modified push-ups," another voice suggested. Even Rick smiled. "All right, that's enough. Everyone up. Basic stances, front stance, Zenkutsu Dachi." The class moved into position, their bodies dropping into deep, powerful stances. Thelma tried to mirror them, but her legs wouldn't bend that deep anymore, wouldn't hold that firm. "Lower," Rick barked. "I want to see those thighs parallel to the ground." She tried. She really tried, but her body betrayed her, trembling and unsteady. Rick walked down the line, correcting stances with sharp taps of his foot against students' legs, adjusting shoulders with firm grips. When he reached Thelma, he stopped. "You call that a front stance?" "I'm sorry, Sensei. I'm trying. Try harder." He moved on without offering correction, without offering help. Just judgment. The class continued. Punch drills, kick drills, combinations that required speed and precision and flexibility that Thelma's 72-year-old body simply didn't have anymore, or at least that's what everyone saw. She moved through the exercises slowly, deliberately, always a beat behind, always struggling. Students moved around her like water around a stone, flowing past their whispers, following in their wake. "I can't watch this anymore. Why doesn't someone stop her? Sensei Rick is savage for letting this happen." Content for TikTok, though. By the end of the hour, Thelma's shirt was soaked with sweat, her face flushed, her breath coming in heavy pulls. When Rick finally called the class to attention for the closing bow, she felt the relief wash over her like cool water. "Good class," Rick announced. "Same time Wednesday. Dismissed." The students broke formation, immediately clustering into their social groups, laughing and chatting as they headed for the water fountain and their gym bags. Thelma remained where she was for a moment, catching her breath, letting her heart rate slow. "Hey!" She looked up to find a young woman standing nearby, early 20s, mixed race with kind eyes, and her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a purple belt and held out a towel. "You okay? You look like you need this." Thelma smiled, genuinely. Smiled for the first time since entering the dojo. "Thank you, dear. That's very kind." "I'm Mia." The girl crouched down slightly, bringing herself closer to Thelma's eye level. "That was your first class, right?" "Yes, quite challenging." Mia laughed, but it wasn't unkind. "Yeah, Sensei Rick doesn't really believe in taking it easy. On anyone." She paused, glancing around at the other students, who were still casting looks in their direction. "Don't worry about them. They're just surprised. Not a lot of people your age come in here." "I imagine not. But I think it's cool. Really cool. Takes guts." Something in Thelma's chest warmed. "You're sweet to say so. You coming back Wednesday?" Thelma looked around the dojo at the students who'd mocked her, at the instructor who'd made no effort to help her, at the manager who watched from her window with that calculating smile. She thought about her apartment, about her quiet evenings, about the way her daughter called every Sunday to make sure she wasn't dead, about the way the world had decided she was done, finished, irrelevant. "Yes," Thelma said quietly. "I'll be back." Mia's smile widened. "Awesome. See you then." As the girl walked away, Thelma slowly retrieved her cane from the wall and made her way to the exit. Behind her, she heard the whispers continue. "She's actually coming back? No way she makes it through another class. $10 says she quits by week 2. You're on." Thelma pushed open the door and stepped into the evening air. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She paused on the sidewalk, looking back through the window at the dojo, at the students, at the space at the mats, where she'd once again tested herself against the judgment of others. Her hand tightened on her cane, and for just a moment her posture shifted. Her spine straightened. Her shoulders squared. Her eyes sharpened with something that looked almost like steel. Then, just as quickly, she let herself slump again, let the weight of age settle back over her like a familiar coat. She had been Thunderhand once. She had made champions kneel and masters bow. She had fought in tournaments where the stakes were honor and blood, where weakness meant defeat and defeat meant shame. But that was 50 years ago. That was another life. That was another woman. Or so everyone believed. Thelma smiled to herself, a small secret smile, and began the walk home. Wednesday came. Thelma returned. The laughter started before she even finished taking off her shoes. "Oh shit, she actually came back? I thought for sure, is she insane?" This time Thelma noticed there were more people watching from the observation area. Staff members, other instructors, even some parents who'd brought their kids early for the junior class. Word had spread. The old woman trying to do karate had become entertainment. Erica stood at the window, her phone out recording. Rick emerged from his office with that same smirk. "All right, everyone, line up. We've got a full house today." The warm-up was brutal. More jumping jacks, more push-ups, more exercises designed to push young fit bodies to their limits. Thelma struggled through each one. Her movements slow and labored, her breath coming in gasps. The whispers never stopped. How is she not dead? This is like watching a car accident. Should we call someone? But this time Thelma noticed something. As she struggled through a modified plank on her knees, trembling, she kept her eyes forward and watched. Watched how Rick moved. Watched how the students positioned themselves. Watched the subtle tells in their stances, the weaknesses in their form, the holes in their defense. She had always been a watcher. Even when she was young, even when she was fast and strong, and feared, she had learned by watching first, then doing. 50 years away from the mat hadn't changed that instinct. During partner drills, no one wanted to work with her. When Rick called for pairing off, students suddenly developed very important reasons to partner with their friends. Thelma stood alone until Mia jogged over. "Want to work together?" the young woman asked brightly. "If you don't mind slowing down for an old lady." Thelma replied with that same gentle smile. "Hey, I could use the practice on my patients anyway. Sensei's always telling me I rush through things." They worked together. Mia demonstrating blocks and strikes, while Thelma mimicked them slowly, carefully, always just a little bit wrong. Not so wrong that anyone would suspect, but wrong enough to look convincing. Like this. Thelma would ask her punch, stopping short, her form deliberately imperfect. Almost. "Just angle your hip a little more. Yeah, like that. Good?" Mia was a good teacher, patient and encouraging. It reminded Thelma of another young person decades ago in Kyoto, showing that same enthusiasm while learning from Thelma's master. That student had gone on to run his own dojo. Thelma wondered if he was still alive. Near the end of class, Rick called for kata demonstrations. "Yellow belts and above, I want to see Heian Shoden, one at a time. Show me what you've got." Students took turns moving through the basic kata, some excellent, some sloppy, all infinitely better than what Thelma could pretend to do. You. Rick pointed at Thelma. Can you do it? The room fell silent. I don't know the movements, Sensei. Then watch and learn. He nodded to a green belt who performed the kata with decent form. Then Rick looked back at Thelma. Now you try. Sensei, I just saw it once. And it was a test. A humiliation. Everyone knew it. Thelma stepped forward, her cane left against the wall, her body bent slightly with age. She moved into what might generously be called a starting position and began. It was painful to watch. She stumbled through movements she couldn't remember, turned the wrong direction, lost her balance once, and had to catch herself. Students covered their mouths trying not to laugh. Some didn't bother trying. Stop! Stop! Rick held up his hand. That was something. Laughter rippled through the class. You've got a lot of work to do, he continued. A lot of work. Yes, Sensei, I'll practice. You do that. As the class ended and students filed out, Thelma heard the conversations bubbling around her. That was painful, dude. Why is Rick even letting her stay? Money, probably. She's paying for classes like everyone else. Still seems messed up. Mia appeared beside her again as Thelma gathered her things. Hey, don't let them get to you. Everyone starts somewhere. You're kind to say so. I mean it. And hey, if you want, we could meet up sometime outside of class. I could show you the basics one-on-one. Might help you feel more confident. Thelma patted her hand. That's sweet, dear, but I wouldn't want to take up your time. It's no trouble. Really, I like teaching. Well, perhaps. Let me think about it. As Thelma left that night, she noticed Erica in the office showing the video on her phone to someone and laughing. The sound followed her out into the parking lot, mixing with the evening traffic and the distant sound of a siren. In her car, an old but well-maintained Honda Civic. Thelma sat for a moment before starting the engine. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, steady and sure. In the rearview mirror, she could see the dojo behind her, lit up against the darkening sky. 50 years ago, she had walked away from this world. She'd had her reasons, good reasons, painful reasons. She'd built a different life, a quieter life. She'd been a teacher, a mother, a wife, a grandmother. She'd been content. But contentment wasn't the same as peace, and there were old wounds that never fully healed, old debts that never fully paid. The Golden Dragon Karate Academy didn't know it yet, but they'd just invited a legend back to the mat. Not to prove herself, she'd done that long ago. Not for glory, she'd had her share, but for something else. Something deeper. Thelma started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, her movements calm, and measured her expression unreadable. Behind that expression, behind that elderly mask, Thunderhand remembered everything. And Thunderhand was patient. The weeks that followed established a rhythm as predictable as it was cruel. Monday, Wednesday. Friday. Thelma would arrive 15 minutes early, change into her simple workout clothes, and take her place in the back corner of the dojo. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the students would watch her struggle through warm-ups, stumble through kata, and fail at even the most basic techniques. The laughter became routine. The mockery became background noise. By the third week, someone had started a betting pool. $20 to whoever could guess when Thelma would finally quit. The board was posted in the locker room, hidden from the main floor, but visible enough that everyone knew about it. Thursday of week 3 had the most bets. No one picked anything past week 5. I'm telling you, she's going to have a medical emergency, said Jason, one of the greenbelts who'd laughed at her from day one. He was stretching near the water fountain before Friday's class, his voice carrying across the dojo. Like it's not funny anymore. It's a liability. His training partner, a stocky guy named Derek, shook his head. Nah, man, she's stubborn. I'll give her till end of the month, then her doctor will probably tell her to stop. Or her family. Can you imagine being her kid and finding out mom's getting humiliated 3 times a week? God, I'd be mortified. They didn't bother lowering their voices. Why would they? Thelma was just the old woman in the corner struggling to touch her toes during stretches, barely able to hold a plank for 10 seconds. She was a joke. Jokes didn't have feelings that mattered. But Mia heard them, and it made something hot and angry twist in her stomach. She'd been training at Golden Dragon for 2 years, had earned her purple belt through sweat and dedication, and she'd seen plenty of students come and go. Some quit because it was too hard. Some quit because life got in the way. Some quit because they realized martial arts wasn't as cool as it looked in movies. But she'd never seen someone endure what Thelma endured, the constant ridicule, the deliberate exclusion, the way Sensei Rick would call on her specifically to demonstrate techniques she clearly couldn't do, just to watch her fail in front of everyone. It was cruel, and nobody seemed to care, except Mia. Hey. Mia dropped down next to Thelma, who was carefully lowering herself to the mat for pre-class stretching. How are you feeling today? Thelma's face lit up with that gentle smile that seemed to be her default expression. Hello, dear. I'm well, thank you. A bit stiff, but that's normal at my age. You sure? Because if you ever need to take a day off, nobody would judge you. Oh, I think plenty of people would judge me, sweetheart. Thelma's eyes twinkled with something that might have been amusement. But I appreciate your concern. Truly. I'm serious, though. This place, some of these people... Mia glanced around, lowering her voice. They're not exactly welcoming. I've noticed. Thelma reached forward, her fingers barely grazing her shins, her flexibility clearly limited. But I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to learn. Are you, though, learning? It was a genuine question, not a barb. Mia had been watching Thelma carefully over the past weeks, and while the older woman certainly looked clumsy and struggled with physical demands, there was something in her eyes during class, a sharpness, an awareness, like she was absorbing everything, even while appearing to understand nothing. I'm learning quite a bit, Thelma said quietly, just perhaps not what everyone expects. Before Mia could ask what that meant, Rick's voice boomed across the dojo. Line up. Let's go. We're not here to chat. Class began the same way it always did. Exhausting warm-ups that left Thelma visibly struggling, while others barely broke a sweat. Then basic techniques, punches, blocks, kicks, that Thelma performed with exaggerated slowness and imperfect form. Then partner drills, where Mia had become Thelma's permanent partner by default, since no one else would volunteer. Okay, everybody, attention up here. Rick clapped his hands together, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. Today we're going to do some light sparring drills. Just controlled contact, working on timing and distance. A murmur of excitement rippled through the class. Sparring was always popular, especially with the younger male students who like to show off. I'll pair you up. Jason, you're with Derek. Martinez, you're with Chen. Thompson, you're with... Rick's eyes scanned the room and landed on Thelma with obvious intention. You're with Stevens. Kyle Stevens was a brown belt 6'2", built like a linebacker, 23 years old. He looked at Thelma and then at Rick with an expression that clearly said, "You've got to be kidding me." Sensei, I don't think... Problem, Stevens. No, Sensei. Kyle's jaw tightened. No problem. Thelma moved to face him, and even standing her tallest, she barely reached his chest. The size difference was almost comical. The danger of it was not. This is insane, Mia whispered to her neighbor. He could hurt her. That's probably the point, came the reply. Rick walked them through the drill. Simple exchanges, one person attacks the other, defends, then switch. Light contact only. Controlled technique. Basic stuff that everyone had done 100 times. Begin. Kyle looked down at Thelma, clearly uncomfortable. You want to go first, or... You go ahead, dear. I'll try to block. He threw the slowest, most telegraphed punch Mia had ever seen, like he was moving through honey, giving Thelma every possible chance to move. And she did move, sort of. Her block came up late and weak, barely deflecting the punch that stopped 6 inches from her shoulder anyway. Switch. Thelma threw a punch that looked like it took all her concentration and strength just to extend her arm. Kyle didn't even need to block it. He just stepped back slightly, and it fell short by a foot. This went on for 5 minutes. Kyle pulling every technique, looking more and more uncomfortable. Thelma struggling through responses that wouldn't have defended against a falling leaf. And the whole class watching, some with amusement, some with second-hand embarrassment, all of them thinking the same thing. What is she doing here? When Rick finally called time, Thelma was breathing hard, sweat running down her temples. Kyle looked relieved to be done. "Good work, Stevens," Rick said with a grin. "Really pushed yourself there." Laughter echoed through the dojo. Kyle's face flushed red. After class, as students filtered toward the locker rooms, Mia found Thelma sitting on the bench near the cubbies, toweling off her face with slow, deliberate movements. "That was messed up," Mia said, sitting down beside her. "What Rick did, pairing you with Kyle." The young man was very gentle, very respectful. "That's not the point. You could have been hurt." Thelma folded her towel neatly and placed it in her bag. "I've been hurt before, dear. I survived." There was something in the way she said it, casual, matter of fact, but with weight underneath that made Mia pause. "What do you mean?" "Oh, just life, sweetheart. Life hurts everyone eventually." Thelma stood carefully, reaching for her cane. "But we get back up. That's what matters." "Mrs. Gardner." "Thelma, please." "Thelma, why do you keep coming back?" "Really?" The older woman considered the question, her dark eyes steady on Mia's face. For a moment, Mia could swear those eyes looked younger than the rest of her sharper, like looking through a window into another time. "Because I have something to prove," Thelma said finally. "Not to them, to myself." She patted Mia's shoulder and headed for the door, leaving Mia sitting alone on the bench with more questions than answers. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Thelma, about the way she endured humiliation, with such grace, about that comment, about being hurt before, about the strange disconnect between her apparent helplessness and the intelligence in her eyes. At 2 in the morning, Mia gave up on sleep and grabbed her laptop. She wasn't sure what she was looking for exactly, but she started searching. Thelma Gardner martial arts turned up nothing. Thelma Gardner karate was equally useless. She tried different combinations, different years, scrolling through pages of irrelevant results. She was about to give up when she tried one more search: Women Martial Artists, 1970s Pioneers. The article that came up was from an obscure martial arts history website, poorly formatted and clearly not updated since the early 2000s. But there, buried in a list of notable female martial artists who'd competed internationally, was a name that made Mia's breath catch. Thelma Thunderhand Gardner, American martial artist who competed in Japan 1968 to 1974. 6-time champion in women's full contact divisions. Known for devastating hand strikes and innovative defensive techniques. Disappeared from competition circuit 1974, whereabouts unknown. Mia stared at the screen. The article included a grainy black and white photograph of a young black woman in a GI. Her stance perfect, her eyes fierce, her hands wrapped for competition. The image quality was poor, the woman's face partially shadowed, but something in the set of her shoulders, the intensity of her gaze. "No way," Mia whispered. She searched more frantically now, finding fragments of information scattered across forgotten forums and digitized martial arts magazines. Most of the details were sparse. Thunderhand Gardner had been somewhat famous in certain circles, but had never achieved mainstream recognition. Women's martial arts in the early 70s wasn't exactly a major sport, but the people who knew who remembered spoke of her with reverence. Trained under Master Takeshi Tanaka in Kyoto, one article noted. First American woman to earn 3rd-degree black belt in his style. Her speed was unnatural, read a translated interview with a Japanese competitor. Like fighting lightning. You would see her move, and it was already too late. She ended her career abruptly after the 1974 Tokyo Championship, another source mentioned. Rumor was she exposed corruption in the tournament organization, left Japan and never competed again. By 3 in the morning, Mia had pulled together a patchwork history of a woman who'd been extraordinary, legendary even, and who'd walked away from it all at the height of her powers. And unless she was completely losing her mind, that woman was now 72 years old and getting mocked 3 times a week at a strip mall dojo in suburban America. Holy shit, Mia breathed. Holy shit. She had to know for sure, had to confirm it. But how? She couldn't just walk up to Thelma and ask if she used to be a legendary martial artist. If it was true, and Mia's gut told her it was, then there was a reason Thelma was hiding it. A reason she was pretending to be helpless. But why? The question haunted Mia through the weekend. Monday's class came and went normally. Normally, meaning Thelma struggled. Students laughed. Rick smirked. But Mia watched differently now. She watched the way Thelma's eyes tracked movements around the dojo. The way her weight distribution, even when she was pretending to be off balance, was actually perfectly centered. The way her failed blocks were just slightly off target, like someone deliberately missing a note in a song. Wednesday evening, Mia made a decision. After class, she approached Thelma carefully. Hey, I was wondering, would you like to grab coffee sometime? I don't know many people in the area, and you seem really nice. Thelma's face brightened with genuine pleasure. Oh, that would be lovely, dear. I'd like that very much. Great. How about Saturday morning? There's a nice place called Rosie's on 5th Street. I know it well. Shall we say 9 o'clock? Perfect. Saturday morning arrived cool and clear. Mia got to Rosie's 15 minutes early, too nervous to wait at home. She ordered a latte and sat by the window watching for Thelma. When the older woman appeared walking slowly with her cane, she looked different somehow, less burdened. Her floral dress was pressed and neat, her silver hair perfect as always, but there was lightness to her that wasn't present at the dojo. Good morning, sweetheart. Thelma slid into the booth across from her. Isn't this nice? They ordered coffee and pastries and chatted about safe things at first. The weather, the neighborhood, Mia's job as a dental hygienist, Thelma's apartment and her garden. It was pleasant, easy, the kind of conversation that could have meant nothing or could have been the foundation for real friendship. But Mia couldn't stop thinking about the grainy photograph, about Thunderhand Gardner, about the legend sitting across from her eating a blueberry scone. Can I ask you something? Mia said, finally setting down her cup. And please don't think I'm crazy. Of course, dear. Why are you really taking classes at Golden Dragon? Thelma's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. I told you. To learn. But you already know, don't you? You already know all of it. The moment stretched between them, delicate and fragile. Thelma could have laughed it off, could have played confused, could have maintained the mask. Instead, she took a slow sip of her coffee and set the cup down with careful precision. What makes you think that? I've been watching you, really watching, and there's something off, in a good way, like you're playing a role. Mia leaned forward. I did some research, found some old articles about a woman named Thunderhand Gardner, 6-time champion, trained in Japan, disappeared from competition 50 years ago. Thelma's hands remained steady on her coffee cup, but her eyes, those sharp, ageless eyes, fixed on Mia with an intensity that made the younger woman's breath catch. That's quite a bit of detective work, Thelma said softly. Is it you? Were you her? Are you her? The silence that followed felt enormous, weighted with decades of secrets and choices and paths not taken. Outside traffic passed on 5th Street. Inside the coffee machine hissed and gurgled. And at their small table by the window, 2 women sat on opposite sides of a truth that could change everything. Finally, Thelma smiled, not her usual gentle grandmotherly smile, but something different. Something that held steel and fire and memory. "If I say yes," she said quietly, "what will you do with that information?" "Nothing. I swear. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. That what I'm seeing is real. And if it is real, if that woman in those old photographs grew old and tired and decided to live a quiet life, what would that change?" "Everything," Mia said. "It would change everything. Because it would mean you're letting them humiliate you on purpose. And I need to understand why." Thelma studied her for a long moment, and Mia felt the weight of that gaze, the assessment happening behind those dark eyes. She was being measured, evaluated, judged worthy or unworthy of truth. "Walk with me," Thelma said finally. "There's a park nearby, very peaceful. We can talk there." They paid and left, walking slowly to accommodate Thelma's cane and careful pace. The park was just 3 blocks away, a small green space with walking paths and benches scattered under old oak trees. It was still early, not many people around yet, just a few joggers and one man walking his dog. They found a bench near a clearing away from the main path. Thelma sat down with a soft sigh, laying her cane beside her. For a moment, she just looked out at the empty clearing, at the grass, still wet with morning dew, at the trees swaying gently in the breeze. "Yes," she said finally. "I was Thunderhand Gardner. I trained under Master Takeshi Tanaka for 6 years. I competed in tournaments across Japan, Korea, Taiwan. I won more fights than I lost. I was good at it. Very good." Mia felt her heart racing. "Why did you stop?" "Because the world I was in, it wasn't as honorable as I'd believed." Thelma's voice carried old pain, old anger. "There was corruption, fixed matches, fighters forced to throw competitions for money. When I discovered it, when I tried to expose it, I made enemies. Powerful enemies. So I left. Came home to America. Built a different life. And now I'm an old woman who nobody sees, nobody respects, nobody fears." Thelma turned to look at her. "Which is exactly what I need to be." "I don't understand." "You will, soon enough." Thelma stood more smoothly than she ever did at the dojo. "It's time for my morning exercises. Would you like to watch?" Before Mia could answer, Thelma was moving. She set her cane carefully against the bench and walked toward the clearing. No shuffle, no hesitation. Just smooth, purposeful steps that covered ground with efficient grace. And then she began. It started slow, a basic warm-up that looked nothing like the clumsy stretches Mia had seen at the dojo. Thelma's body flowed through movements with fluid precision, each position perfect, each transition seamless. Her age was still evident. The body couldn't completely deny 72 years, but the skill, the mastery, that was timeless. She moved into kata, and Mia recognized the form Heian Shoden, the same basic kata that Thelma had stumbled through so miserably in class. But this wasn't stumbling. This was art. Every block was precise, every punch snapped with power, every stance was rock solid. Where the young students at Golden Dragon performed the kata mechanically, Thelma performed it with understanding, with purpose, with breath and body and spirit in perfect alignment. Then she moved to advanced forms. Mia had never seen techniques that flowed like water and struck like thunder. Her hands were fast, impossibly fast for someone her age, and Mia could see it now, could see why they'd called her Thunderhand. The speed wasn't flashy or exaggerated. It was economical, efficient, devastating. Mia sat frozen on the bench, watching a legend come alive in the morning light. This was what Thelma had hidden beneath her mask of weakness. This was what the laughing students at Golden Dragon couldn't see, because they'd already decided what she was. After 20 minutes, Thelma slowed, moving through cool-down stretches with the same precision she'd shown throughout. When she finally stopped, she wasn't even breathing hard. She walked back to the bench, picked up her cane, and settled down beside Mia with that familiar, gentle smile back in place. "So," Thelma said, "now you know." Mia realized her mouth was open and closed it. I don't even have words. That was incredible. Thank you, dear. Why are you hiding it? Why are you letting them treat you like that at the dojo? Thelma looked out at the clearing where she'd just demonstrated 50 years of mastery. Because sometimes the best way to see the truth of a place is to be invisible in it, to let people show you who they really are when they think you're powerless. But what's the point? What are you looking for? Justice, maybe. Or maybe just proof that I made the right choice walking away all those years ago. Thelma's expression turned distant. The martial arts should teach discipline, respect humility. But places like Golden Dragon, they've turned it into something else, something hollow. I wanted to see for myself, wanted to understand what we've lost. And what have you found? That some things never change, that people still value appearance over substance, strength over wisdom, youth over experience. Thelma turned to Mia, and her eyes were sad. But I've also found that there are still good people. People like you who see beyond the surface, who show kindness to someone they think is weak, not because you expect anything in return, but because it's right. Mia felt tears prick her eyes. What happens now? Now I continue. I keep going to class, keep struggling, keep watching. Thelma patted her hand. And you keep my secret. Can you do that? Yes, of course. But Thelma, how long can you keep this up? As long as it takes. As long as what takes? Thelma smiled, and this time it was neither gentle nor kind. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how it would end. Until the moment is right, she said. Until they've shown their true colors completely. Until there's no doubt what kind of place Golden Dragon really is and what kind of people run it. She stood leaning on her cane once more, the mask settling back over the legend. Trust me, sweetheart. Every humiliation, every laugh, every moment of mockery, I'm collecting them all. And when the time comes when the moment is perfect, they'll understand exactly who they've been underestimating. They walked back toward their cars in comfortable silence. Before they parted, Mia grabbed Thelma's hand. Thank you, she said, for trusting me, for showing me. Thank you for seeing me, Thelma replied. For really seeing me. That's rarer than you might think. As Mia drove home, her mind was racing. She'd come to the park with suspicions and left with certainty. Thelma Gardner Thunderhand was waiting for something, planning something. And when it happened, when she finally revealed herself, it was going to shake Golden Dragon to its foundation. Mia just hoped she'd be there to see it. And maybe, just maybe, she'd get to stand beside the legend when the mask finally came off. Because something was coming. Mia could feel it the same way you can feel a storm building on the horizon. The pressure was building. The stage was being set. And at 72 years old, with her cane and her gentle smile, and her perfect secret, Thelma Gardner was orchestrating it all. The students at Golden Dragon thought they were watching a comedy. They had no idea they were part of something much bigger. Something that would force them to confront everything they thought they knew about strength, about respect, about who deserved to be seen and who deserved to be dismissed. Monday would come. Thelma would return to class. The laughter would continue. But now, Mia would watch with different eyes, would see the performance for what it was, would understand that every stumble was calculated, every weakness a choice. And somewhere beneath that elderly exterior, Thunderhand was counting down to the moment when she'd remind the world what real power looked like. The next 2 weeks passed with excruciating slowness for Mia, who now watched every class with the weight of Thelma's secret pressing against her chest. It was like watching a play where she was the only one who'd read the script, the only one who knew the ending. Every laugh from the other students made her jaw clench. Every smirk from Rick made her hands ball into fists. And every time Erica stood at that observation window with her phone out recording Thelma's struggles for whatever sick amusement she got from it, Mia wanted to scream the truth. But she'd made a promise. And Thelma had been clear. The moment wasn't right yet. So Mia watched and waited and played her own role of the kind student who partnered with the helpless old woman out of pity. She watched Thelma stumble through techniques, watched her fail at basic stances, watched her struggle to keep up with warm-ups that should have been impossible for someone her age anyway. And through it all, Mia now saw what no one else could see: the calculation behind every mistake, the purpose behind every failure. Thelma was building something, creating a narrative so complete, so convincing, that when it finally shattered, the impact would be devastating. It was a Friday afternoon, the dojo thick with heat, despite the air conditioning working overtime, when Erica made her announcement. She'd called Rick into her office right before class, and through the window, Mia could see them talking. Erica gesturing enthusiastically, while Rick nodded, that familiar smirk growing on his face. When they emerged, Erica clapped her hands for attention, even though class hadn't started yet. "Everyone gather around, I have an exciting announcement." The students clustered near the front, curious. Thelma remained in her usual spot in the back corner, carefully stretching her hamstrings, seemingly oblivious to the commotion. "So," Erica began, her voice carrying that artificial enthusiasm of someone about to sell something. "Next Friday, we're going to do something special. A demonstration day. We'll invite family and friends, show off what our students have been learning, really celebrate the Golden Dragon community." Murmurs of interest rippled through the crowd. Demonstration days were popular, a chance to show off, to have parents and friends see all that hard work paying off. "We'll have students at every level performing," Erica continued. "Kata board-breaking sparring demonstrations. It's going to be amazing." She paused, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on exactly who she'd been looking for. "And we want everyone to participate. Everyone. Even our newest students." Mia's stomach dropped. She looked at Thelma, who had stopped stretching and was now standing, one hand on her cane, her expression as pleasantly mild as ever. "Mrs. Gardner," Erica called out, her smile widening, "we'd love for you to do a kata demonstration. Show everyone how much you've learned in your time here." The dojo went quiet. Students exchanged glances, some confused, some amused, all of them recognizing this for what it was. "Oh, I don't know," Thelma said softly. "I'm not very good. I wouldn't want to embarrass myself." "Nonsense!" Erica's voice was sugary sweet, dripping with false encouragement. "This is about celebrating progress, not perfection. And honestly, I think it would be inspiring. A woman your age having the courage to get up there and try, that's what Golden Dragon is all about." The words were right. The intention was poison. Rick stepped forward, his arms crossed. "I think it's a great idea. You've been training with us for 6 weeks now. Time to show what you've learned." "I really don't think—" "It's not optional," Rick said, his tone shifting from suggestion to command. "All students participate in demonstration days. That's the policy." Thelma looked around the dojo at all the faces watching her, some sympathetic, most just curious about how this train wreck would unfold. Her fingers tightened slightly on her cane. "Well," she said finally, "if that's the policy, then I suppose I'll do my best." "Excellent." Erica beamed like she'd just done something wonderful. "It'll be great. Trust me." As the manager walked back to her office, Mia heard the whispers start immediately. "Oh my God, this is going to be brutal. Why would they do that to her? Dude, I'm definitely bringing my camera. My mom's gonna die when she sees this." Class proceeded normally after that, if normal meant everyone was distracted by what was coming next Friday. Mia worked with Thelma during partner drills, and for the first time since she'd learned the truth, Thelma acknowledged it with the slightest pressure of her hand on Mia's arm. "It's time," she whispered so quietly, Mia almost missed it. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Thelma's eyes held that steel Mia had seen in the park, that core of iron beneath the gentle exterior. "Trust me, sweetheart. Everything is happening exactly as it should." After class, Mia caught up with Thelma in the parking lot. "What are you going to do?" she asked urgently. "They're setting you up. You know that, right?" "Of course I know." Thelma unlocked her old Honda, moving slowly, every inch the elderly woman she pretended to be. They want to humiliate me in front of a crowd, make themselves feel powerful by crushing someone they see as weak. So why let them? Why not just quit now? Why give them what they want? Thelma settled into her driver's seat, then looked up at Mia with something like sadness in her eyes. Because they need to understand what they've become, what this place has become. And sometimes the only way to teach that lesson is to give people exactly what they think they want and let them discover what they've actually earned. I don't understand. You will. Thelma started the engine. Next Friday, you'll understand everything. The week that followed was electric with anticipation. Word spread about the demonstration day, about the old woman who was going to perform kata, and students who never would have bothered coming to watch suddenly marked their calendars. The betting pool expanded now. It wasn't just when Thelma would quit, but how badly she'd embarrass herself during the demonstration. The line between cruel humor and genuine malice had blurred completely. Erica promoted the event on social media, posting professional-looking graphics about celebrating students of all ages and abilities, while privately telling Rick it was going to be absolutely hilarious and perfect content for viral marketing. She'd even invited a local news station pitching it as a feel-good story about senior fitness. Rick spent the week coaching students on their demonstrations, fine-tuning kata-preparing board-breaking setups, organizing sparring matches. But he spent zero time helping Thelma prepare, offering no guidance, no support. She was on her own exactly as they wanted. Through it all, Thelma came to class and continued her performance. She struggled. She stumbled, she failed, and she watched everything with those sharp, patient eyes that only Mia recognized as the eyes of a hunter waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Friday arrived with unusually warm weather, the kind of late autumn day that felt stolen from summer. By 5:30, an hour before the demonstration was scheduled to start, the dojo was already filling up. Parents, siblings, friends, significant others, they packed into the observation area and lined the walls. Someone had set up extra chairs. Erica had arranged refreshment tables with cookies and punch, making it feel like a bizarre combination of martial arts demonstration and elementary school recital. The local news crew showed up at 6, a reporter and a cameraman, looking mildly bored but professional. Erica descended on them immediately, talking enthusiastically about community and inspiration and the Golden Dragon difference. Mia arrived early and claimed a spot near the front where she could see everything. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was it. Whatever Thelma had been planning, whatever she'd been building toward it, was about to happen. Thelma arrived at exactly 6:15, wearing her usual simple workout clothes and carrying her cane. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile, like the weight of the coming humiliation had physically diminished her. Several people actually looked away, unable to watch what they knew was coming. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Golden Dragon Demonstration Day. Rick's voice boomed through the space, amplified by a microphone system that seemed excessive for the size of the dojo. We've got an amazing lineup for you tonight. Our students have been working incredibly hard, and we're so proud to showcase their progress. The demonstrations began with the junior students, kids between 8 and 12, performing basic kata with the kind of adorable imperfection that made parents beam and cameras flash. Then the teenage students more polished their techniques, sharper. Then the adults getting progressively more impressive with each rank level. Board breaking came next, the satisfying crack of wood splitting, bringing applause and cheers. Sparring demonstrations followed, carefully choreographed but exciting to watch the controlled combat, drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Through it all, Thelma sat quietly in the corner, appearing to watch but showing little reaction. Mia kept glancing at her, looking for some sign, some indication of what was coming. But Thelma's face remained serene, almost blank. Finally, after 90 minutes of demonstrations that had showcased every level and every skill, Rick returned to the microphone. And now, He said, his voice taking on a tone that was probably meant to sound encouraging, but came across as condescending. "We have something really special. One of our newest students who's shown incredible courage by starting her martial arts journey later in life. Mrs. Thelma Gardner is going to perform Heian Shoden for us." The applause was polite, but confused. People weren't sure what they were about to witness. The students who knew who'd been watching Thelma fail for weeks exchanged knowing looks. Some pulled out their phones. Erica positioned herself with a perfect angle to capture whatever was about to happen. Thelma stood slowly, leaving her cane leaning against the wall. She walked to the center of the dojo floor, her steps small and careful, her posture bent with age. When she reached the center, she turned to face Rick and bowed a proper bow, deep and respectful, holding it for the appropriate length of time. Something flickered across Rick's face. Surprise, maybe. That bow had been perfect, technically flawless, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual smirk. "Whenever you're ready," he said into the microphone. Thelma moved into the starting position for Heian Shoden. Her stance was shaky, her weight distribution clearly uncertain. She took a deep breath, and the room fell silent. Even the news camera was rolling now, capturing what everyone assumed would be either inspirational or tragic, depending on your perspective. She began the kata the same way she'd performed it in class, slowly, uncertainly, her blocks weak, her punches lacking power. The first few movements were painful to watch, exactly what everyone expected. Mia heard someone behind her whisper, "Oh God, I can't look." But then something changed. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Thelma's next movement was smoother. Her stance dropped a fraction lower, became a fraction more stable. The following technique had more snap to it, more precision. Mia leaned forward, her breath catching. With each movement, Thelma was transforming. The shakiness evaporated. The uncertainty vanished. Her blocks became sharp and perfect. Her punches began to crack through the air with power that shouldn't have been possible. Her stances deepened and solidified until she looked rooted to the earth itself. The crowd went quiet, really quiet. The kind of quiet where everyone knows they're witnessing something but haven't quite processed what it is yet. Thelma moved through the kata with increasing speed and precision, and her body, that elderly, frail body that everyone had dismissed, was moving with the fluid grace of pure mastery. Each technique flowed into the next with perfect timing. Each stance was textbook perfect. Each strike could have broken bone. This wasn't an old woman pretending to know karate. This was a master demonstrating an art form she'd perfected decades ago. Rick's smile had frozen on his face. Erica had lowered her phone, her mouth slightly open. The news crew had stopped looking bored and started looking fascinated. Thelma finished the kata with a final powerful punch that seemed to echo in the silent dojo, then returned to the starting position and bowed. When she straightened, she wasn't the bent, fragile old woman anymore. She stood tall, her spine straight, her shoulders back, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made the entire room take a collective breath. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire dojo erupted in applause, genuine, stunned, thunderous applause. "Holy shit!" Someone breathed behind Mia. "Did that just happen? Who is she?" Rick had gone pale. His hand gripping the microphone so tightly, his knuckles were white. Erica looked like she'd been slapped. Her carefully constructed moment of mockery shattered into something she couldn't control. Thelma walked to the edge of the mat, but she didn't reach for her cane. She simply stood there, waiting, her expression calm and patient. "That was..." Rick's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "That was unexpected. Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Gardner." "We're not done yet," a voice called out from the back of the room. Everyone turned. An elderly Japanese man was making his way through the crowd, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd lived a long life but maintained control over every muscle. He was small, probably in his 80s, wearing an immaculate dark suit. His white hair was combed back from a face weathered by time, but still sharp with intelligence. The man walked straight to Thelma, stopped 3 feet away, and bowed deeply. A bow of profound respect. The kind of bow that sent a message to everyone watching. When he straightened, there were tears in his eyes. "Thunderhand," he said, his English accented but clear. "After all these years, I thought I would never see you again." The room erupted in whispers. Thunderhand. What's he talking about? Who is that guy? Thelma's composure cracked for just a moment, emotion flashing across her face. "Kenji, is that really you?" "It is. I am Kenji Tanaka, son of Master Takeshi Tanaka." He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying authority despite his age. "This woman is Thelma Gardner, known in Japan as Thunderhand. She trained under my father for 6 years. She earned her 3rd-degree black belt before she was 30 years old. A feat almost unheard of for any student, let alone a woman, let alone a foreigner in that time." Rick looked like he might be sick. Kenji continued, his voice growing stronger. "She competed in full-contact tournaments across Asia and won 6 championships. She defeated fighters who had decades more experience. She was fast, powerful, and disciplined. She was one of the greatest martial artists my father ever trained." He paused, looking back at Thelma with affection and sadness. "And then she vanished. Left Japan in 1974 and never came back. My father spoke of her often, always wondering what became of his brilliant student." "I'm sorry," Thelma said softly. "I'm sorry I never contacted him. I'm sorry I disappeared." He understood. He always understood. He knew you left because you refused to compromise your honor. Kenji smiled. He would be so proud to see you now, to know you never lost your skill, your spirit. Your father was the greatest teacher I ever had. Everything I know, everything I am, I owe to him. The moment hung between them, heavy with decades of history, with respect and loss and memory. Then Kenji turned to Rick and Erica, and his expression hardened. "You have been teaching this woman?" he asked. Rick stumbled over his words. Yes. She enrolled 6 weeks ago. And did you recognize her skill? She didn't show. She showed you exactly what you deserved to see, Kenji said coldly. She gave you every opportunity to treat her with respect, to see past her age and recognize her spirit. And you failed. Completely. Erica's face had gone from shocked to calculating, clearly trying to figure out how to spin this. Now wait a minute. This is all very dramatic, but we've been nothing but welcoming to Mrs. Gardner. You set her up to humiliate her, Mia said, standing up, her voice cutting through the dojo like a blade. She was done being quiet. You paired her with advanced students in sparring, knowing she couldn't defend herself. You made her do this demonstration specifically to mock her in front of a crowd. You recorded her struggles and laughed about them. Everyone here knows it. Everyone saw it. Students started nodding. Some of them looked ashamed. A few looked defiant, but nobody denied it. The news reporter was scribbling furiously in her notepad, the cameraman still rolling, capturing everything. Rick's face cycled through emotions, denial, anger, fear, before settling on defensive. She never told us she had experience. She signed up as a beginner. We treated her like any beginner. No, Thelma said quietly, finally speaking up. You treated me like a joke, like something to laugh at. You saw an old black woman and decided I was worthless. You saw weakness and decided it was funny. She took a step forward, and even though she wasn't threatening everyone, felt the power radiating from her. I've spent 6 weeks watching how you teach, how you treat students, how you've corrupted everything martial arts should stand for. This place isn't about discipline or respect or honor. It's about ego. It's about money. It's about making people feel powerful by putting others down. That's not, Erica started. It's exactly true. Thelma cut her off, her voice still soft, but carrying absolute authority. I know what a proper dojo looks like. I trained in one for 6 years. And this? She gestured around the Golden Dragon Academy. This is nothing but a business wearing the costume of martial arts. The silence that followed was devastating. Parents looked uncomfortable. Students looked at the floor. The news crew looked delighted to have stumbled into a real story. Rick's face had gone from pale to red. You lied to us. You deliberately. I did nothing you didn't deserve, Thelma said simply. I gave you a chance to be better, to show compassion to someone you thought was helpless, to demonstrate the values you claimed to teach. And you failed. Spectacularly. Kenji nodded his approval. My father taught that the true measure of a martial artist is how they treat those weaker than themselves, not with pity, but with respect, not with mockery, but with patience. He looked around the room. This place has failed that test. Get out, Rick said suddenly, his voice tight with barely contained rage. Both of you, get out of my dojo. Gladly, Thelma replied. She finally walked over and picked up her cane, though now it seemed more like a prop than a necessity. She turned to Mia. Would you like to walk out with me, dear? Mia didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag and joined Thelma, and together they headed for the door. Kenji followed, and behind them a few other students stood up too. One was a teenage girl who'd always been kind. 2 were lower-ranked adults who'd watched the mockery with increasing discomfort. They voted with their feet, choosing to leave, rather than stay in a place that had revealed its true nature. As they walked out into the parking lot into the warm evening air, Thelma took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Well, she said, that was cathartic. Mia laughed, slightly hysterical with relief and awe. Cathartic? That was incredible. Did you see their faces? I saw. Thelma smiled. I saw everything. Kenji approached them, his expression warm. Will you have dinner with me? Please, I have so many questions. So much to tell you about my father, about what happened after you left. I would love that, Thelma said. I have much to tell you as well. They exchanged contact information, made plans for the following evening, and Kenji departed with one final deep bow that Thelma returned with equal respect. When they were alone, Mia turned to Thelma. What happens now? Thelma looked back at the Golden Dragon Academy, where through the window they could see chaos people arguing, Rick shouting Erica on her phone, probably trying to do damage control. Now, Thelma said thoughtfully, now they have to live with what they've revealed about themselves. Now they have to face the fact that they humiliated themselves far more than they ever humiliated me. She turned back to Mia. And now I can finally stop pretending to be helpless and start being useful. What do you mean? I mean there are students in there who deserve better. Students like you who showed kindness when it wasn't cool or easy. Students who want to learn real martial arts, not just ego-boosting exercises. Thelma's eyes held that steel again, but this time it was forged with purpose. Maybe it's time to show them what that looks like. As they stood in the parking lot, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows across the pavement, Mia realized this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Thelma hadn't just revealed herself to humiliate Rick and Erica. She'd revealed herself to offer something better, to show an alternative, to prove that real strength, real mastery, real wisdom could still exist in a world that had forgotten what those things truly meant. And standing next to this 72-year-old woman who'd just shaken an entire dojo to its foundation, Mia felt privileged to witness what came next. The video went viral within hours. Someone had recorded Thelma's transformation on their phone, and by midnight it had been shared across every social media platform imaginable. The comments section exploded with reactions ranging from awe to anger to disbelief. By morning, the story had been picked up by martial arts blogs, then local news outlets, then national media. The headline variations were endless, but the message was always the same. Elderly woman humiliated at dojo turns out to be legendary martial artist. Thelma's phone, which usually rang maybe twice a week with calls from her daughter, suddenly wouldn't stop. News organizations wanted interviews. Martial arts magazines wanted her story. Old students of Master Tanaka from across the world somehow found her number and called to express their joy at discovering she was alive. The small, quiet life she'd built over 50 years was suddenly under a spotlight she'd never wanted. But the call that changed everything came 3 days after the demonstration on a Monday evening, while Thelma was making tea in her small kitchen. The number was blocked, and she almost didn't answer. Something made her pick up anyway. "Is this Thelma Gardner?" The voice was male young, carrying a trace of an accent she recognized immediately as Japanese. "Yes, this is she. The woman they call Thunderhand." "I used to be called that, yes." A pause. Then, "My name is Hiroshi Kojima. I believe you knew my father. Takeshi Kojima." Thelma's hand tightened on her teacup. That name. God, she hadn't heard that name in decades, but it still had the power to send ice through her veins. "I knew him," she said carefully. "A long time ago. He died 3 years ago, alone, disgraced, because of what you did to him." "What I did was expose corruption. Your father was fixing tournament matches, taking bribes to determine winners before fights even happened. He was destroying the integrity of... He was trying to survive." Hiroshi's voice cracked with emotion. "You were a foreigner, protected by Master Tanaka's reputation. My father was just a promoter, trying to navigate a complicated system. When you exposed him, you destroyed everything. His business, his reputation, his honor. Our family lost everything." "I'm sorry for your pain," Thelma said quietly. "Truly. But I couldn't be part of that corruption. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening." "You could have handled it privately. You could have shown mercy. Instead, you humiliated him publicly, made him an example. He never recovered, and now I see your back, your name everywhere, treated like a hero." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. Where was his heroic redemption? Where was his second chance? "Hiroshi, I challenge you, officially. A match, one fight, you and me. Let's see if the legend of Thunderhand is real or just the story of a woman who destroyed a good man and ran away before facing consequences." Thelma closed her eyes. "I'm 72 years old. I'm not a fighter anymore. I saw the video. You moved like someone half your age. You humiliated those instructors without even breaking a sweat." His voice hardened. "You owe my father's memory this fight. You owe our family this chance to restore our honor. Fighting you won't restore anything. It will just create more pain, more anger. Then you're a coward, the great Thunderhand afraid of a simple match." He paused, letting that sink in. "I'll be at Westside Martial Arts Academy this Saturday at noon. It's a public facility, they rent space. If you have any honor left, any courage, you'll meet me there. If not, then everyone will know the truth. That you're just an old woman who got lucky 50 years ago and has been hiding ever since. Hiroshi, please listen." But the line was already dead. Thelma stood in her kitchen, the tea forgotten, staring at nothing. She could ignore this, should ignore this. There was nothing to be gained from fighting a young man with a grudge and everything to lose. She'd proven her point at Golden Dragon. She'd revealed the truth. That should be enough. But she knew it wouldn't be. Hiroshi would tell his story, would paint her as a coward, and the narrative would shift. More than that, though, she understood his pain. She'd taken something from his family, even if she'd done it for the right reasons. And that debt, that complicated, messy, painful debt, had never been settled. She picked up her phone and called Mia. "Hey." Mia's voice was bright, excited. "Have you seen the news? You're everywhere. There's a whole article in the Post about—" "I need your help," Thelma interrupted gently. "Something's happened." 20 minutes later, Mia was at Thelma's apartment, listening with growing concern as Thelma explained about Hiroshi, about his father, about the challenge. "You're not seriously considering this," Mia said. "He's what 30-40 probably been training his whole life specifically for this moment. It's not fair." "Fair has nothing to do with it. He's in pain. His father's death, the disgrace he carried, that pain has to go somewhere. So let it go somewhere else. You don't owe him a fight." "Don't I?" Thelma's eyes were distant, looking at something Mia couldn't see. "I destroyed his father's life. I had good reasons, but that doesn't change what I took from their family. Maybe this is the debt I have to pay. Or maybe he's just looking for revenge and you're going to get hurt. Maybe." Thelma smiled slightly. "But I think I need to find out." The next morning, Thelma called Kenji Tanaka. They'd had dinner twice since the demonstration day, long evenings of reminiscence and catching up, of sharing stories about Master Takeshi and the old days in Kyoto. When she told him about Hiroshi's challenge, the line went quiet for a long moment. "Takeshi Kojima's son," Kenji said finally. "I remember when that scandal broke. It destroyed several families, not just his." "I know. I've carried that knowledge for 50 years. "You did the right thing, Thelma. Exposing corruption, refusing to participate in dishonor, those were the correct choices. Correct choices can still create pain." "Yes, they can." Another pause. "Are you going to fight him?" "I think I have to. Not to win, not to prove anything, but to give him closure, to let him express his anger and pain in a space where it can be witnessed and acknowledged. That's very wise, and very dangerous. You're not young anymore, my friend. I'm aware." Thelma looked at her hands, at the age spots and the slight tremor that never quite went away. "But I'm still Thunderhand, and Thunderhand doesn't run from her debts." "Then I'll be there, as a witness, as your friend." "Thank you, Kenji." Saturday arrived with gray skies, threatening rain. The West Side Martial Arts Academy was a large facility in an industrial part of town, the kind of place that rented out space for everything from yoga classes to kickboxing to kids' birthday parties. Thelma had reserved the main training floor for 2 hours, paying cash, giving her real name, because there was no point in hiding anymore. She arrived at 11:30, wearing a simple black gi that she'd pulled from the back of her closet, a gi she hadn't worn in decades, but had never been able to throw away. It still fit, though looser than it once had. She tied her belt, her third-degree black belt, faded and worn with the precise movements of long habit. Mia and Kenji were already there, along with a handful of others. The teenage girl who'd walked out of Golden Dragon, the 2 adults. Word had somehow spread the way these things do, and a few other people had shown up, old martial artists, mostly gray-haired and curious, wanting to witness something they'd only heard about in stories. By 11:45, maybe 30 people sat in the observation area. By 11:50, it was closer to 50. At exactly noon, the door opened and Hiroshi Kojima walked in. He was in his late 30s, Thelma estimated, lean and muscular, with the build of someone who trained religiously. His gi was immaculate, his black belt crisp and new. His face was sharp, handsome in an angular way, but his eyes carried old anger, old pain that had calcified into purpose. Behind him walked 3 other men, all around his age, all wearing gis, all moving with the confidence of experienced martial artists. His supporters, his seconds, his witnesses. Hiroshi walked directly to where Thelma stood in the center of the mat. They faced each other, both still, both measuring. "You came," he said. "I gave you my word. I'm here. And you understand the terms: full contact. No stopping until one of us submits or cannot continue." Murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. That wasn't a sparring match. That was a real fight. "I understand," Thelma replied. "Good." Hiroshi bowed sharp and perfunctory. "Then let's begin." They moved to opposite sides of the mat. A man in his 60s, one of Hiroshi's group, stepped forward to act as referee. This is a challenge match, full contact. Fight continues until submission or incapacitation. Do both fighters understand? Yes, they said in unison. Bow to each other. They bowed. Begin. Hiroshi moved immediately, closing the distance with 3 quick steps and launching a high roundhouse kick aimed at Thelma's head. It was fast, technically perfect, designed to end the fight quickly. Thelma moved. Not backward, not away, but into the kick, her body shifting at an angle that made the strike miss by inches. Her hand flashed out in a block that redirected his momentum, and suddenly, Hiroshi was off balance, stumbling past her. He recovered quickly, spinning into a back fist that Thelma ducked under. She didn't counter, didn't attack. She just moved, evading, redirecting her body, flowing like water around his strikes. Fight back, Hiroshi snarled, launching a combination, punch-punch-kick that should have overwhelmed her. But Thelma was already somewhere else. Each strike found only air, only the space where she'd been a heartbeat before. She moved with economy, with precision, wasting no energy, showing no fear. This was what 50 years of mastery looked like. Not power or speed, though she had both, but understanding. The ability to read an opponent, to see attacks before they fully formed, to move with such efficiency that effort became irrelevant. Hiroshi pressed harder, his frustration building. He threw kicks, punches, elbow strikes, everything in his arsenal. He was good, legitimately skilled, and each technique was executed properly. But nothing landed. Nothing even came close. Stand still! He lunged forward with a straight punch that had real power behind it. This time, Thelma didn't evade. She stepped into the punch, her hand rising to meet his wrist, and suddenly, Hiroshi was airborne, his own momentum used against him, his body describing a perfect arc before slamming into the mat hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. Thelma stood over him, her hand extended to help him up. Hiroshi slapped her hand away and rolled to his feet. His face was flushed now, sweat beading on his forehead, his breath coming faster. Don't mock me. I'm not mocking you. I'm trying to show you. He attacked again, this time with anger behind his technique, his form starting to break down as emotion overrode discipline. Wild strikes, powerful, but uncontrolled, the fighting style of someone seeking to hurt rather than win. Thelma's expression shifted from neutral to sad. She'd seen this before in training halls and tournaments, the moment when a fighter abandoned technique for rage. It never ended well. She caught his next punch, twisted his arm gently but firmly, and swept his legs. He went down again, harder this time. Before he could rise, Thelma moved behind him, her arm around his neck in a perfect rear naked choke, not tight, not cutting off air, but positioned so he could feel exactly how easily she could end this. "Yield," she said softly, her mouth near his ear. "Please, there's no shame in it. Never." He tried to break free, but she was already releasing him, stepping back, giving him space. Hiroshi climbed to his feet. His GI was disheveled now, his hair hanging in his eyes. 5 minutes into the fight, and he looked exhausted, while Thelma barely seemed winded. "You don't understand," he said, his voice cracking. "I have to do this. I have to beat you. It's the only way to restore my family's honor." "Your family's honor was never mine to take," Thelma replied. "Your father made his choices. I made mine. We both paid prices for those choices. You paid nothing. You walked away, started over, lived your life. My father died alone, disgraced his name, a punchline." Tears were running down Hiroshi's face, now mixing with sweat. "He was a good man who made mistakes. He deserved better than what you gave him." "You're right," Thelma said, and her admission seemed to shock everyone watching. "He did deserve better. I was young. I was righteous, and I was cruel. I could have handled it with more compassion. I could have given him a chance to make it right privately. Instead, I exposed him publicly, because I was so certain I was doing the right thing." She took a breath. "I'm sorry. For your father's pain. For your family's suffering. For my part in that. I'm truly sorry." Hiroshi stood frozen, like he'd been ready for anything except that. "But fighting me won't change the past," Thelma continued. Beating me won't bring your father back. It won't restore what was lost. All it will do is perpetuate the cycle, pain, anger, creating anger. Then what? Hiroshi's voice was broken. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Let it go. Not forget, never forget. But let go of the need for revenge. Let go of the belief that hurting me will heal you. Because it won't. Thelma stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. Your father's legacy doesn't have to be defined by his mistakes. You can honor him by being better, by choosing compassion over vengeance. I don't know how, Hiroshi whispered. I'll teach you, if you'll let me. The offer hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect. Hiroshi stared at her, this woman who'd destroyed his father's life, who'd just humiliated him in front of witnesses, who was now offering exactly what he'd spent years refusing to believe he needed. Why? He asked. Why would you help me? Because you deserve better than the burden you've been carrying. Because your father, despite his mistakes, was someone who loved you enough that you're willing to fight for his memory. Because I'm old enough to know that mercy is stronger than victory. Thelma extended her hand again. And because it's never too late to break a cycle of pain. For a long moment, Hiroshi didn't move. Then slowly he reached out and took her hand. His grip was tight, desperate, the grip of someone drowning who'd just found something solid to hold on to. I don't forgive you, he said, his voice raw. I don't ask you to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But perhaps we can move forward anyway. Hiroshi nodded, unable to speak, and Thelma pulled him into an embrace. He resisted for only a second before collapsing against her, this elderly woman he'd come to fight, and his shoulders shook with sobs he'd probably been holding back for years. The watching crowd sat in stunned silence. This wasn't what anyone had expected. Not a brutal fight or a dramatic knockout or a clear winner and loser. Instead, they'd witnessed something more powerful. A moment of genuine reconciliation, of choosing compassion over anger. Kenji Tanaka stood and bowed deeply toward the mat, tears streaming down his face. My father would be so proud, he said, of both of you. Mia was crying too, she realized, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She'd expected to watch Thelma fight. Instead, she'd watched her win through something more difficult than any physical technique, the courage to be vulnerable, to admit fault, to offer mercy, when revenge would have been easier. When Hiroshi finally pulled away, his face was blotchy and his eyes were red, but something in his expression had shifted. The hard edge of anger had softened into something more complex. Grief, yes, but also the first glimmer of possibility of healing. I was training to fight you for 3 years, he said. Since I found out you were still alive, I learned everything about your style, your techniques. I came here to destroy you. I know. But you didn't destroy me back. You could have. I saw it. Every time you evaded, every time you threw me, you were pulling your power. You were showing me the difference in our skill without humiliating me. I've been humiliated enough in my life to know how it feels. I won't do that to others if I can avoid it. Hiroshi looked at his hands, at the mat, at the people watching. I don't know what to do now. I built my whole life around this moment. And now you build a different life, Thelma said. One not defined by your father's past or your need for revenge. One where you use your skill and your passion to teach others to help others. She paused. I meant what I said. I'll help you. Whatever you need. I need to understand, Hiroshi said. I need to know everything that happened. Not the story I heard growing up, but the truth. All of it. Then we'll talk. For as long as it takes. Thelma turned to Kenji. Both of us. Kenji knew my teacher knew that world. Between us, we can help you understand the complexity of what happened. Kenji nodded. I would be honored. The watching crowd began to disperse, people leaving quietly, respectfully, understanding that they'd witnessed something sacred. A few approached Thelma and Hiroshi to offer words of support or congratulations, though for what exactly none of them seemed quite sure. Mia waited until most people had left before approaching. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, she said. You turned a fight into healing. Sometimes that's what fighting really is, Thelma replied. Not about defeating someone, but about confronting pain and finding a way through it together. Hiroshi bowed to Mia. You're Thelma's student. Friend, Mia corrected. Though I hope to learn from her. Then we'll learn together, Hiroshi said. He looked at Thelma. If that's acceptable. If you're really willing to teach me. More than willing, Thelma assured him. But first I think we all need some tea and a long conversation. There's a cafe nearby. My treat. They left the academy together. Thelma, Mia, Kenji, and Hiroshi, an unlikely group bound by history and pain, and the possibility of something better. As they walked through the parking lot, Thelma glanced back at the building where she'd just fought her last real match. She'd come to the fight expecting to settle a debt. Instead, she'd planted the seed of something new. Hiroshi had come seeking revenge. Instead, he'd found the beginning of healing, and the cycle of pain that had started 50 years ago in Japan that had claimed Hiroshi's father and haunted Thelma's conscience was finally starting to break. Tell me, Hiroshi said as they walked, his voice still hoarse from emotion, but steadier now. The techniques you used today. The way you moved. I've never seen anything like it. That, Thelma said with a small smile, is because you learned to fight like you were trying to destroy your opponent. I learned to fight like I was trying to understand them. There's a difference, a profound difference. And if you're serious about learning, that's where we'll start. The rain that had been threatening all morning finally began to fall light and gentle, washing the streets clean. They hurried toward their cars, already making plans for when to meet next, where to train, what to discuss. And in that moment, walking through the rain with people who hours ago had been strangers or enemies, Thelma felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Not peace exactly. Peace was too simple a word for something this complicated, this earned. But perhaps the beginning of peace. The first steps toward it. And after 50 years of carrying the weight of choices and consequences, that was more than enough. The cafe was warm and smelled of coffee and cinnamon, a welcome refuge from the rain that now fell steadily outside. They claimed a corner table, the four of them settling in with the comfortable awkwardness of people who'd just been through something intense and were still processing what it meant. Thelma ordered a pot of green tea to share. Hiroshi asked for black coffee extra strong. Mia got hot chocolate, and Kenji requested chamomile. For a few minutes, they just sat in the quiet sounds of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations, the rain drumming against the windows. Then Hiroshi spoke, his voice still rough but steadier than before. I need to know something, he said, looking directly at Thelma. When you exposed my father, when you revealed the match-fixing, did you know what it would cost him? Did you understand what would happen? Thelma met his gaze without flinching. I knew there would be consequences. I didn't know how severe they would be. I was 28 years old, certain of my righteousness, convinced that exposing corruption was worth any price. She paused, her hands wrapped around her teacup. I was wrong about that last part. Some prices are too high even for the truth. But you did it anyway. I did it anyway, because I couldn't continue fighting in tournaments I knew were rigged. I couldn't accept victories that weren't earned or losses that were predetermined. It felt like a betrayal of everything Master Takeshi had taught me about honor and integrity. Kenji nodded slowly. My father was devastated when it all came out. Not because Thelma had exposed it, he actually supported her decision, but because the system he'd been part of, the world he'd dedicated his life to, was revealed to be so corrupt. It nearly destroyed him too. I didn't know that, Thelma said softly. He never told me. He wouldn't have. He was too proud, and he loved you too much to burden you with his pain. Kenji smiled sadly. But yes, many people suffered when the truth came out. The scandal touched everyone involved in competitive martial arts in Japan during that era. Hiroshi absorbed this, his jaw tight. My father told me a different story. That you were jealous of his success, that you wanted to eliminate competition, that you lied about the fixing to advance your own career. That's the story he would tell, Thelma said without judgment. People rewrite their histories to make themselves the heroes. I understand that. I've done it myself. But it wasn't true. No, it wasn't true. They sat with that for a moment, the truth settling between them like something solid and real that couldn't be argued away or reframed. I wasted so much time. Hiroshi finally said, his voice breaking slightly. So much energy on anger, on planning revenge, on hating someone I didn't even know. And for what? For a story that wasn't even accurate. Not wasted, Thelma corrected gently. That anger kept you training, kept you disciplined, kept you moving forward. It wasn't healthy, but it served a purpose. Now you can use that same discipline, that same dedication for something better. Like what? Like teaching. Mia interjected. Like helping other people who are carrying pain and anger and showing them there's another way. Hiroshi looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. You're very wise for someone so young. I learned from the best, Mia said, nodding toward Thelma. Actually, Thelma said, an idea forming in her mind. I've been thinking about something. Mia, you mentioned a few weeks ago that you were frustrated with Golden Dragon, that you wanted to learn real martial arts, not just the performance version. Yeah, but after what happened at the demonstration, I can't go back there. None of us can. Mia gestured to indicate herself and the few other students who'd walked out that night. Exactly. Which got me thinking, what if we created an alternative A place where martial arts is taught the way it should be taught, with discipline, respect, humility, with focus on the internal journey, not just external technique? Kenji's eyes lit up. A dojo. You want to start a dojo? I'm 72 years old, Thelma protested, but without much conviction. I should be retired watching game shows, not starting new ventures. Age is just a number, Kenji said, his voice warming with enthusiasm. My father taught until he was 86, said it kept him young, kept him connected to purpose. But I don't have a space. I don't have resources. I have space, Hiroshi said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. I own a building, in the Riverside district. It used to be a gym, but it's been vacant for 2 years. I was going to sell it, but... He looked at Thelma. What if this is the way forward? What if instead of fighting each other, we build something together? The possibility hung in the air, fragile and beautiful. Thelma looked at each of them, at Mia's eager hope, at Kenji's gentle encouragement, at Hiroshi's tentative redemption. She thought about the students at Golden Dragon who deserved better, about the corruption and ego that had poisoned so many dojos, about Master Takeshi and what he would want his legacy to be. It would take work, she said slowly. A lot of work. The building would need renovation. We'd need equipment. We'd need to establish a curriculum. I can help with renovation, Hiroshi offered. I'm a contractor. It's what I do when I'm not training to fight legendary martial artists. A small smile. Progress. I can help recruit students, Mia said. And I can handle social media marketing, all that stuff. Make sure people know there's an alternative to places like Golden Dragon. And I, Kenji said, can provide legitimacy. My father's name still carries weight in martial arts circles. If I endorse this dojo, if I help establish the curriculum based on his teachings, people will listen. Thelma felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or purpose. Or perhaps just the recognition that the universe sometimes offers second chances when you least expect them. Then let's do it, she said. Let's build something worth believing in. They spent the next 2 hours at that cafe table, sketching plans on napkins, sharing ideas, building the framework of something that didn't yet exist, but felt inevitable. By the time they left, the rain had stopped, and the sun was breaking through clouds, painting everything in golden light. The news about Thelma and Hiroshi's match spread almost as quickly as the original demonstration video had. But this time, the story was different. It wasn't about humiliation or revenge or even victory. It was about reconciliation, about choosing healing over harm, about the possibility of breaking cycles that seemed unbreakable. And as that story spread, something unexpected happened. Students started reaching out, not just from Golden Dragon, but from dojos across the city, across the state, from people who'd been training in martial arts and feeling like something essential was missing. They'd learned the techniques, earned the belts, won the competitions, but they'd never found the deeper purpose, the spiritual dimension that martial arts was supposed to offer. Within a week, Thelma had received over 100 emails. Within 2 weeks, that number had tripled. People weren't just asking about classes. They were asking about philosophy, about discipline, about how to find meaning in a world that seemed increasingly focused on surface achievement over internal growth. Meanwhile, Golden Dragon Karate Academy was falling apart. The local news story about Thelma's humiliation had evolved into an investigation about the dojo's practices. Former students came forward with stories about bullying, about instructors who mocked, rather than taught, about a culture that valued ego and money over genuine martial arts training. Erica Morrison tried to spin it, tried to frame everything as a misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. Then someone leaked the betting pool about when Thelma would quit. That particular detail, the fact that instructors and students had literally been wagering on her failure, became the final nail in the coffin. Parents pulled their kids. Adult students canceled memberships. Sponsors withdrew support. Within 3 weeks of the demonstration, Golden Dragon had lost 60% of its student base. Rick Donovan, meanwhile, had gone quiet. He'd deleted his social media accounts, stopped giving interviews, essentially disappeared from public view. But then, on a Tuesday evening, 5 weeks after everything had fallen apart, he showed up at Hiroshi's building. Thelma was there with Mia and Hiroshi taking measurements and discussing floor plans when Rick knocked on the door. Through the glass, she could see him standing in the parking lot, his posture uncertain, his confidence completely gone. "I'll tell him to leave," Hiroshi said immediately. "No," Thelma replied. "Let him in. Let's hear what he has to say." Rick entered slowly, like someone walking into hostile territory. He looked different, smaller, somehow diminished. The swagger was gone. In its place was something that looked like genuine shame. "Mrs. Gardner," he said, "I owe you an apology, a real one." "You owe me nothing," Thelma replied calmly. "But if you need to say it, I'll listen." Rick took a breath. "What I did, what I allowed, what I encouraged, it was cruel. I knew it was cruel. I justified it by telling myself it was funny that you were an adult who could make your own choices, that I was just running a business." He looked at the floor. "But the truth is, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed feeling superior, enjoyed watching someone struggle, enjoyed the power of being the one who decided who was worthy and who wasn't. And that makes me sick." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Thelma had heard confessions before, had seen people confront their own darkness. She knew the courage it took. "I've lost everything," Rick continued. "The dojo is failing. My reputation is destroyed. Erica fired me and is trying to pin everything on me to save herself. I'm 38 years old, and I have to start over from nothing." He finally looked up, meeting Thelma's eyes. "But I deserve it. I deserve all of it." "Maybe," Thelma said, "but deserving punishment and finding redemption aren't the same thing." "I don't expect redemption. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did to you, I did it because I could, because the system allowed it, because nobody was stopping me. You showed me what I'd become, what that place had become." "So what will you do now?" Rick laughed bitterly. "I don't know. Find a job, I guess. Pay rent. Try to figure out who I am when I'm not Sensei Rick, the guy in charge, the one everyone has to respect." Thelma studied him for a long moment. Then she said something that shocked everyone in the room, including herself. "Come work with us." "What?" Not as an instructor. Not yet. Maybe not ever, depending on how things go. But we need help. This building needs renovation. We need someone to handle scheduling, facilities management, the boring administrative work that makes a dojo function. It doesn't pay much. Actually, it doesn't pay anything yet. But it's honest work in service of something better than what you were doing. Rick stared at her like she'd just offered him the moon. Why would you do that? Why would you give me anything after what I did? Because everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. Because you came here and told the truth when you could have stayed away. Because I believe people can change if they're given the opportunity and the support. Thelma's voice was firm but kind. But understand this, if you come work with us, you'll be starting at the bottom. You'll take orders from people you used to outrank. You'll work harder than you've ever worked for less recognition than you're used to. And most importantly, you'll be held accountable. Not punished, but accountable. There's a difference. Rick's eyes were wet. I don't deserve this. Probably not. But none of us get what we deserve. We get chances. What we do with them is up to us. He nodded, unable to speak, and Thelma could see the moment something fundamental shifted in him. Not a complete transformation that would take years, but the first crack in the armor of ego that had protected and imprisoned him. Over the following weeks, the building transformed. Hiroshi and his crew worked on the structure, repairing walls, refinishing floors, installing proper lighting and ventilation. Rick, true to his word, showed up every day to do whatever needed doing, from hauling equipment to organizing storage to cleaning bathrooms. The work was humbling, and Thelma watched him slowly shed the persona he'd built and start discovering who he might be underneath it. Mia handled outreach and communications, crafting a message that emphasized the dojo's philosophy, martial arts, as a path to self-understanding, discipline, as a form of self-love, strength that builds rather than destroys. The response was overwhelming. By the time they were ready to open, they had a waiting list of over 200 potential students. Kenji worked on curriculum, drawing from his father's teachings, consulting with Thelma about how to adapt traditional techniques for modern students without losing their essential meaning. They decided to call the dojo Tanaka Academy, honoring the master who had taught them both in different ways about what martial arts could be. And Hiroshi, to everyone's surprise, revealed himself to be an exceptional teacher. His technical skill was undeniable, but more than that, he understood pain in a way that made him patient with struggling students. He knew what it felt like to carry anger, to be consumed by the need for vindication, and he could recognize those patterns in others and help them find healthier paths forward. The official opening was scheduled for a Saturday in early December, 3 months after the demonstration at Golden Dragon. They'd sent invitations to everyone who'd expressed interest, unsure how many would actually show up. They'd planned for maybe 50 people on the first day. Over 300 came. They filled the newly renovated space, spilled into the parking lot lined up down the street. Young and old, experienced martial artists and complete beginners, people from every background imaginable, all drawn by the story of Thunderhand and the promise of something authentic in a world full of cheap imitations. Thelma stood at the entrance, greeting each person, her eyes shining with emotion she didn't try to hide. Among the crowd, she recognized faces from Golden Dragon students who'd laughed at her students, who'd been kind students, who'd simply been there. They came to her now, some apologetic, some hopeful, all of them seeking something they'd realized was missing from their training. When everyone had gathered inside, Kenji called for attention. The crowd quieted, and he spoke about his father, about the principles that had guided his teaching, about the responsibility they all carried to preserve and honor the true purpose of martial arts. Then he introduced Thelma, and the applause was thunderous, genuine, filled with respect that had been earned rather than demanded. Thelma stepped forward, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She looked at the faces before her, at Mia and Hiroshi and Rick and Kenji, at the walls that Hiroshi had helped build, at the mats that would hold so many feet, at the space that had been empty and broken and was now filled with possibility. 50 years ago, she finally said, her voice carrying clearly through the room, I walked away from martial arts because I'd seen it corrupted by greed and ego and the hunger for power over others. I told myself I was done with it, that I'd found peace in living a quiet, ordinary life. But I was wrong. I wasn't at peace. I was hiding. From pain, yes, but also from purpose. She paused, gathering her thoughts. A few months ago, I walked into a dojo and let them see me as weak, as helpless as someone to be mocked. I did it to prove a point, to expose the rot that can exist in places that claim to teach discipline and respect. But what I discovered was something more important. I discovered that even in corrupt places there are good people. People like Mia, who showed kindness when it wasn't cool. People like Hiroshi, who had every reason to hate me but chose healing instead. People like Rick, who confronted his failures and asked for the chance to be better. Rick, standing near the back, looked at the floor, but his shoulders straightened slightly. So this place, Thelma continued, gesturing around the dojo, isn't about me. It's not even about martial arts, really. It's about the journey from who we are to who we could be. It's about recognizing our weaknesses, not with shame, but with honesty, so we can transform them into strength. It's about understanding that the greatest fight isn't with others, it's within ourselves. Against our fear, our ego, our desperate need to feel powerful by making others feel small. The room was absolutely silent, every person hanging on her words. My teacher, Master Takeshi Tanaka, used to say that a true martial artist could walk through a room of enemies and turn them into friends simply by being present with compassion. I didn't understand that when I was young. I thought martial arts was about winning, about being the strongest, about proving myself. But now I understand. Real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. Real power isn't about making people fear you. It's about making them believe in themselves. She looked directly at the students from Golden Dragon, at the ones who'd mocked her. Some of you laughed at me. Some of you made me the butt of jokes. Some of you thought I was pathetic. And you know what? That's okay. Because you were reacting to what you'd been taught to value: youth strength, physical prowess. You'd been trained in a system that celebrated those qualities above all others. But you're here now, which means you're ready to learn something different. And I'm ready to teach you. The emotion in the room was palpable. People were crying quietly, but openly. They'd come expecting a martial arts class, and were getting something much more fundamental: permission to be vulnerable, invitation to be honest, the promise that growth was possible. So here's what we're going to do, Thelma said, her voice warming. We're going to train. We're going to sweat and struggle and fail and get back up. We're going to learn techniques and kata and sparring. But more importantly, we're going to learn about ourselves. About our limits and how to honor them while still pushing to grow. About our anger and where it comes from and how to transform it into discipline. About our fear and how to face it with courage rather than bravado. She smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look both ancient and ageless. Welcome to Tanaka Academy. Welcome to the beginning of your real training. Welcome home. The applause that followed wasn't just appreciation, it was relief. The sound of people recognizing that they'd found something they'd been searching for without quite knowing it existed. Classes began the following week. Thelma taught the advanced students, the ones with experience who needed to unlearn bad habits and rediscover first principles. Hiroshi taught intermediate levels, bringing his technical precision and his hard-won wisdom about transforming pain into purpose. Rick worked with beginners, and he was surprisingly good at it, patient and encouraging, having learned through his own humiliation what it felt like to struggle under judgment. Maya, despite being a relative beginner herself, became assistant instructor, helping wherever she was needed. Her natural kindness and enthusiasm, making every student feel seen and valued. And Kenji, when his health permitted, taught special seminars on philosophy and history, connecting techniques to their deeper meanings, helping students understand that martial arts was a complete system for developing character, not just combat skills. The transformation wasn't instant or easy. There were conflicts, challenges, moments of doubt. Some students left, deciding they preferred the easier ego boost of places like Golden Dragon. but most stayed drawn by the authenticity of what was being offered, by the sense that they were part of something meaningful. Within 6 months, Tanaka Academy had become a fixture in the community. Within a year, they'd expanded to offer classes for children, for seniors, for people with disabilities, for anyone who wanted to learn. The waiting list never got shorter, but they refused to compromise their standards or grow too quickly. Quality mattered more than quantity. Golden Dragon, meanwhile, closed its doors permanently. Erica Morrison moved to another state, her reputation too damaged to recover locally. The building was bought by a yoga studio. The story became a cautionary tale in martial arts circles about what happens when ego and profit corrupt traditional practices. On the 1-year anniversary of Tanaka Academy's opening, they held a special ceremony. They'd commissioned a plaque to honor Master Takeshi Tanaka, and Kenji was going to unveil it and speak about his father's legacy. But when the cloth was pulled away, there were 2 plaques, one for Master Takeshi, and one for Thelma Gardner Thunderhand, 6-time champion, 3rd-degree black belt teacher, and living embodiment of strength that heals rather than harms. Thelma hadn't known. She stood staring at her name carved in brass, at the brief description of her accomplishments at the place of honor on the wall, and she couldn't stop the tears. "You didn't think we'd forget, did you?" Mia said, standing beside her. "You didn't think we'd let your story disappear again?" "I don't need recognition," Thelma protested weakly. "This isn't about what you need. It's about what we need. We need to remember. We need to see that name every day, and remember that real strength looks like a 73-year-old woman who could have destroyed her enemies, but chose to transform them instead." Hiroshi stepped forward, his voice formal but warm. "In Japan, we have a concept called ongeshi, repaying kindness and obligation. You gave me back my honor when you had every right to simply defeat me. You gave Rick a second chance when he deserved nothing. You've given all of us a place where we can grow into better versions of ourselves. This plaque, it's inadequate, but it's a start." The ceremony continued. Students performed demonstrations not for show, but as genuine expressions of their progress. Parents thanked Thelma for the changes they'd seen in their children: more discipline, more confidence, more compassion. Adults talked about how the training had helped them manage stress, overcome anxiety, find purpose in their lives. And through it all, Thelma stood with her hand on Mia's shoulder and watched the legacy she'd built without meaning to the community that had formed around principles she'd thought were dead in modern martial arts. She thought about Master Takeshi, about what he would say if he could see this. She thought about the young woman she'd been in Kyoto, so certain and so righteous and so unaware of how complicated the world really was. That evening, after everyone had left and the dojo was quiet, Thelma stood alone on the mat. Her body ached. It always did these days, the price of 73 years, but it was a good ache, an earned ache. She moved through a kata slowly, deliberately feeling each position, each transition, each moment of balance and power. This was what she'd been meant to do. Not compete, not prove herself, not defeat enemies, but teach, build, create space for transformation. Show people that strength and gentleness weren't opposites, but partners, that discipline and compassion could coexist, that the real victory was becoming someone you could respect. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Mia had returned, as she often did, to practice extra, or just to sit in the space they'd created together. "You okay?" Mia asked. "Better than okay," Thelma replied. "I was just thinking about something Master Takeshi told me once. He said the greatest legacy isn't the victories you win, but the students you inspire to be better than you were." "Pretty sure you've nailed that one." Thelma laughed softly. "Maybe. Or maybe we're all just figuring it out together." They stood together in the quiet dojo, teacher and student, legend and inheritor, 2 people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and built something that would outlast them both. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, people rushing through their lives, most of them unaware that in this small space something essential was being preserved and passed forward. The story of Thunderhand had started with a young woman in Japan who'd been willing to sacrifice everything for honor. It had continued with an old woman in a suburban dojo who'd been willing to endure humiliation to expose corruption. And now it was becoming something bigger, a living legacy that reminded people that the path of the warrior wasn't about violence, but about character. That true mastery meant lifting others up rather than putting them down. That the greatest battles were won not through defeating others, but through conquering the worst parts of yourself. As Thelma finally left that night, locking the door behind her, she looked up at the sign above the entrance, Tanaka Academy. Below it, in smaller letters, "Where strength learns compassion." It was perfect, simple, true, exactly what the world needed. She walked to her car through the cool December night, no longer needing her cane, her posture straight, her step sure. Tomorrow would bring more students, more challenges, more opportunities to teach and learn. But tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that she'd finally completed the circle from student to champion, to exile to teacher. The journey had taken 50 years and more pain than she'd ever imagined, but it had brought her exactly where she needed to be. And somewhere she liked to imagine Master Takeshi was smiling.